Good evening, good morning, wherever we are in different parts of the world. Rohan, welcome from South America, and Siddharth, welcome from the other part of Mumbai. Uh, we are here today to discuss some of the issues surrounding accessibility and some of the possible directions in which we could look for solutions for accessibility in either in the tech space or in the area of how to make mindsets alter in different ways to accommodate accommodate a lot more empathy in this space. So going straight into the conversation, tell us, Siddhant, why and when did you actually begin to see this as a very serious concern, and you kind of dived into accessibility?
So for me, largely, this was a personal thing. Like it was a personal journey that got me in this domain of inclusion and disability access. It was in my third year of architecture that my mother acquired visual impairment. And sadly, I think this is one point with the domain of accessibility, right? That when it hits you personally, you suddenly realize that it affects all aspects of your life. It is not only one particular thing that gets affected, like your social domain, your the day-to-day work that you're doing. A simple thing like your own house, like the own house that my mother lives in for like last 33 years, became an inaccessible space. Corners would hit, like furniture pieces would come in between, and likewise simultaneously you're also suddenly being questioned by the society about what's wrong with your eye, what's happening with you. Like, will, like, even like my grandmother was worried of that level, that this would be a genetic thing, and like how would we get married. So it's a longer understanding of various associations that we bring along as a stigma with disability. So that's where it began. And while I was in my third year of architecture, I thought that I would be training myself in this space. We would have like electives on universal design, but sadly, it was all around wheelchair access. It was like only the visible disabilities were catered for, and there's nothing about the invisible disability, and not all disabilities are visible. So I think that became a point. And the third push that literally got me in this domain was a students' competition that was hosted by UNESCO and ASI, which was on making World Heritage Sites in India disabled friendly. And we won that, like me and my two partners, Jay and Siddhi. We won that, and we were actually taken to Sachi Stupa with a group of children with diverse disabilities to create and bring out prototypes of what we had put out in our competition. So that was really when like push came to shove, and I was like, okay, now this is what I want to get into. As a domain, I want to explore the field of inclusion and accessibility. And journey began through making monuments accessible, and now we have spread out into various different ventures.
Wonderful. So we'll come back to that conversation very quickly once Rohan gives us his introduction piece. So Rohan, when did it become very important for you to start this relationship with Siddhant and with this whole issue of accessibility, and now to have actually gone ahead and make it as the centerpiece of your profession?
Yeah, I think it started into a lot of bits and pieces which came and formed something solid. I started interning with Siddhant sir when I was in SD, and I did some projects with him simultaneously along with all the projects we had in college. And there was one point of time when I realized that this is the real thing. Like, this is something which needs to be done. This is something which needs to be spoken about, but there are very few people doing it. And being from the communication design background, UI UX, everything was playing in my mind, and this got merged into it, and I found something new to do. So that was very interesting, and from there on I joined TCS, where I'm currently working on. I fortunately got a project here as well, which is completely focused on accessibility, and it gave that push which was required, and then I came into this whole space of digital accessibility. Yeah.
So coming back to you, Siddhant, there are three parts to this, right? One part is the part which is the affected person, the disabled person, the challenged person. the other part of it is the caregiver, and the third part of it is the society. So you have three players who are sort of in not perhaps in conflict, but in some interplay of things. And this intersection is very complicated. Tell us a little bit about what you faced in your life.
So, as you said, right, like, and I came across this at the early stage. I came across this understanding of like the lens at which disability is looked at. There are two major lenses at which disability is considered. One is the social model of disability, where the given is that the society disables the person. The person with its ability and their whatever challenges that they have, if they need to enter a building, there needs to be a ramp, like there needs to be the infrastructure for them to go inside the space. It is if the absence of a ramp is what makes them disabled. It's not themselves on a wheelchair. So that is one model. And second model, which sadly which we have in India, is like largely looking at the caregiving model of the medical side of it. That disability is always seen as something that could be fixed with medical treatment or therapy, or looking at like different ways in which you intervene with a disability, where the person is put, and then you design things around that. And it is only when it was in one of my interviews where somebody asked me this question that, would you have taken this domain if your mother was not visually impaired? And I think that is a very strong point, and it brings all three stakeholders, as you've mentioned, right? Like, as a society, like, what are the things as a designer, what role do we play in enabling that access? As caregiver, like, is it by choice that one is a caregiver, or like is put in that position without any training? Like when this happened, like suddenly we had to be very careful of like, if like what time is my mother going out, right? Is she going out at a certain point in time? If she's going alone on the road, like how are we walking with her? Like what elements? Like recently she had an accident which like she was crossing and there was somebody coming from the wrong side, but because of her vision impairment, like that was not visible for her, so she was hit by that bike. So now, whose fault is that? Is it the person who's going in the wrong direction, or like not honking, or the person who's there? And multiple factors come together in that piece. And I feel that it's more like a jigsaw. Like each piece has its role to play in that. The society needs to look at like requirements that they need to put in. And I also feel that it is the responsibility somewhere of the society and those who are enabling those things, right? Like I particularly feel that accessibility is a universal plugin, like every element, like be it your fintech app, like app for banking, or be it a space that you are designing, be it a museum, or like even like a simple thing like, any ATM that you would go into, while they will just put a small notice saying that sorry, because, we are not able to, apologies because we are not able to put in a ramp. And I actually came across a particular setup like that, where a restaurant wanted to put up a ramp at the main entry point, but they were told that you only own that much part of your restaurant, like the other part is a government property. तभी उसका permission लेके. So each stakeholder has a role to play in this, and that is why, like post the RPWD Act, which is the Rights for Person with Disability Act that came in 2016, things are changing, awareness is increasing, and it is coming in. But I think it has to go deep in every stream of education and design for this to be spoken as a mainstream thing. It should not be that something that you add on into your design, but it needs to be at the apex of it, where these considerations are made, and it is truly human centric. Because the disability is like diabetes, it could happen to anyone at any given point in time.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you. But we'll come back to that point about the larger role of society. So Rohan, tell me, this now you've taken the ideas of what you were doing in the classroom to the space of a corporation.
Mm-hmm.
Now you're dealing with major players, high stakes, a lot of people involved, a huge impact, and technology. Tell us a little bit about how that transition happened between being empathetic to an idea to connecting with this whole business of to finding the right technology piece in the corporation to amplify your interests. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I think it all started from looking at a bigger picture, what we used to discuss all the time. So it's not only creating some design or creating an experience, but it was more about how useful it is to people, how many people can actually use it. Are we restricting the users to, say, I think the disability population across the world right now is around 1.5 or 2 billions. So we are excluding those 2 billion people out of what we are creating. It's a huge thing, right? You are losing on your money, you're losing on your efforts, you're losing on your audience. So that was something which was going on. And in the tech industry, this is being looked at by the major players, like the big ones at present, like Microsoft, Google, Apple. These three are, I think, topping the list of making their products accessible, and they have it built in the system already. So it's not like something which they're patching up on the existing things, but it's in that process. So if there is a product life cycle, accessibility is a part of it. It's not something external, like if you have time, do it kind of thing. So think it's coming in at a very fast rate, and people are looking into it. There are a lot of people who are majorly being recruited for this role of accessibility across the industry. It's not only design, but it's about testing and all of things which are going on before any application gets out. So there are a lot of stakeholders, what I would say, right from an HR person who is hiring a person with disability, which comes under the umbrella of inclusive hiring, to his colleagues who are treating him right, accordingly in the space where they're interacting with them. And at the end, when he's standing, or when the person is standing with other people who are around, he should feel inclusive. Like the culture should be such that he doesn't feel left out in any of the activities which are carried out. So the IT space, I think it's catching up with accessibility slowly. In India, I see there are a lot of IT firms, and the overall industry is looking after it. And if we, so what Siddhant sir mentioned about one point, right? When policies come into place, it makes it more streamlined. And that is something which India needs more, a more regulated look at accessibility, because there are a lot of people who are doing it, but there isn't that one thread which will connect all of them and make a bigger thing out of it, is what I feel. Yeah.
Just a counter question to that, just to elaborate on it, do you see this happening in players, only the big players, or do you see it also happening in the smaller players, like in India, corporations are also looking at it? Do you see that happening as well?
It's happening. It's happening with the ones which have larger budgets, because that is another concern when something like accessibility comes into picture. Right now, because of limited resources, the budget is high, is what I saw, at least in the digital accessibility space. And that is making them rethink about, should we take it? How much will we gain out of it? Whenever we invest in something, we think of our profits, right? So that is one thing which needs to be put out, that investing in accessibility gives you something. It's like human mindset, right? Everyone thinks of, what will I get out of it? So unless they know what they will get out of it, it won't happen easily. So that's something which we as designers should put it forward when we are, say, creating something or pitching for something, that this is something which is not only for 2 billion people in the world, but it's for the entire population which exists. Like if you create a ramp, you can take your heavy luggage on it. It's not only for a wheelchair use.
Yeah, absolutely right. And
Uh,
the thing is that we can make something which is meant only for a certain set of people, but find that a lot more other people who are not challenged using it quite comfortably. Like for
yeah.
example, the audio story. I mean, the way in which
Uh-huh.
audio stories are panning out. Okay, so coming to Siddhant, um, again, three players. There is the government, there is the corporation, and then there is the individual. Now, all three of them are in some way have some role to play in this. So, how does the synergy happen? How do you foresee this sort of coming together to resolve this, or at least find some directions to resolve it?
Ananda, particularly in our culture, like we have always been made to feel that, if you see a blind person on the road, go and help them. Like it's always that sympathy-based approach that has been brought into it. Largely when you look at the bigger players, it's always a charity-based approach. That, or let's do something for this community. It would only change when, like, it is not done for the compulsion of it, or as Rohan was mentioning, that they the groups or a person with disability is the largest minority in the world. Like it's like almost 1.5 to 2 billion people, right? So you really can't like not put them away, say that okay, like we'll figure things out, and they have to be brought mainstream. Another very important thing is that the mindset that needs to change. Accessibility, inclusion is also about the mindset. Like the whole reason why, like why should somebody feel that something special is being done for them? That is what we celebrate. Like when a ramp is made outside a bank or a police station, they will like garland it and like put it up. Like it is, you're not, why should you celebrate that when it is something that is supposed to be part of your considerations at the beginning? Not something that you need to celebrate. Oh, now we are accessible. So accessibility is a very important element because it starts here. Like it starts in your mindset when you're conceptualizing it, and it needs to be a part of it. Like you cannot retrofit accessibility. Accessibility, it can't be a virtue, it has to be a necessity. It needs to be done every day. It needs to be part of your thinking process. As you were mentioning, that as Rohan said, that a ramp, or like today we all use like a WhatsApp video call, right? Like it was designed for sign language communication, but today it is being used by everyone. Or suddenly during COVID, like online meetings became a preference for anybody who was hearing impaired, because everybody, all the people in the audience or in the meeting became a front facing audience. So you could lip read them easily. So there are possibilities that, that a certain thing when designed, keeping a human in the center around that, can bring usability. And then when we talk about these three stakeholders, right, the individual, the community, and the government, right? Sadly, we still don't have strict rules and applications. Right? If you go to America, they swear by the ADA. Like you will not get a OC or an occupation certificate in any premise if it is not approved by the ADA. Like you don't have the disability associations clearance. So, but today, like large number of buildings or like public spaces are are getting those elements in them, like as an add-on, but it is not mandatory. It is not something that they are supposed to do it. It is only if they wish to do it, they consider and they bring those things in. So somewhere compulsion is also important, and somewhere it's also the mindset through which we are brought in, that it is not about the sympathy, but it's about when we start thinking from the empathy side of it, we start considering things for everyone. Like we have some really interesting students who are looking at, like when they're designing the fashion products, or like if they're designing communication tools, why is it not that it is considered as a given, that it's not an add-on, that let me create something separately? Or any student who is in the interior design space, why not consider space like looking at people from diverse backgrounds that would be using it, right? And then it automatically blends in into the design, and it is no longer that sore ramp that is seen sticking on that one plinth of a build space. So I think these are two approaches, and this is what we have seen in last 7 years. And things are also changing. As Rohan mentioned, like there are players in the industry who are setting certain examples for providing these facilities, bringing people in the workspace. I think that's another very important, because if you bring them in, then you automatically realize that what are the needs and the requirements, and you are looking at your product through their lens, through your user's lens, and then automatically they are part of your team, which would then make sure that your product is being designed in a certain way. So I think things are happening, and they are on the positive side of the curve, which is growing, but it's extremely slow.
Because you said extremely slow, I'll direct the next question straight to you before I come to Rohan.
Yeah.
Is that okay? So there will be the special day. There will be many ribbons cut, a lot of nice speeches that will come, and people will say all the right things. But it is slow, and why is it so slow? What is this lethargy? I mean, I'm sure the government is doing a lot of things.
Yeah.
But why is this so slow?
This is my personal experience and this is my personal opinion, if you read what's written ever on a fire extinguisher, it says that like even though you may have a smaller fire extinguisher but the fire is big, if you hit at the source you can curb the fire. I think we are at that point. Sadly, we are only like taking a fire extinguisher and using it on the top of the fire, which is not going to help the source. If the education system, which with like all the imagine the number of young minds that we are producing in every domain, like if they are sensitized towards this element of like considering inclusion not as a act of kindness but as something that you need to do it as a practice, like considering thinking about this people in design, and we as designers I think play a major role, like design schools play an extremely important role in that. So I think at that level, or even at the level of schools, if we are able to change, if we are able to bring that level of sensitivity and awareness, I think that curve will change faster. It is sometimes shocking. Like Rohan has assisted me on some of our corporate projects, and we are going to corporates that are like 50 years, like they are like 50-year-old or like 55-year-old, and they are like people who have seen the globe, and still you are going there and giving them a basic disability etiquette training. That imagine if that entire generation had that when they were in school, you wouldn't have to go and do it there because that would become a part of practice. So if we are able to aim at the source, change things at the source, then we can really bring these elements together. That's in small way Access for All is trying to do that, like working with institutes, working with design colleges to bring that in element of inclusion as mainstream design and not just an add-on in the design element. So yeah, I think like this is my answer, particularly how the curve will rise faster.
Let's
Just
hope
to
so.
add, just to add one point, I
Yeah,
think
Rohan,
the day, the
Rohan,
day,
when you answer this, whatever you say right now, you add to this. This was the part about your generation. Is unfortunately handling this envelope as well of
Yes.
how we deal with mindsets which are 70 years old and who have not been made aware of a lot of these challenges. So how do you look at this sensitization to happen? And secondly, what is tech going to be doing next?
Yeah.
Yes, Rohan, over to you.
Yeah, so I think the efforts what we are doing, the day where we don't need to justify why they need to take accessibility into consideration is a day which I think will solve all the problems. Because laws, rules, regulations will keep coming on. But the day people think that it's important, then only it will happen. Because see, we even have laws for wearing helmets, right? But unless a person sees someone going hitting a bike or meeting an accident, they won't necessarily very strictly wear it. So that's, I think, what is required. So this sensitization, as sir mentioned, should start from the point where they understand about it. It can be their schooling, it can be their college education or the university education. I think we already have, right, at SD we already have an inclusive design course which is being conducted. So that is the point. When we are learning something new which we will be applying further into our future, uh, that's the point where it should come and hit, so it automatically gets into that process part and not as an add-on. And from the tech part, it's all assistive technologies, all artificial intelligence merging together and forming up something new. I see Figma, which is a widely used software, doing it. They recently released a beta version wherein we can use screen readers into design. So this brings the persons with disability right at the start of product building stage. It's not after the entire coding is done, everything is done, then they will go check and say, oh no, this is not working, so you need to fix this. And then it's about dollars, right? You have to spend so much dollars to get a code fixed. Better do it in the design stage and fix it, right? So that is something which is happening. Then there are a lot of chat GPT stuff which is going on, and it will surely help persons with learning disabilities, or ADSD or autism, to figure out things much easily than what they are doing right now. So they have to write something, they can tell AI, they get it wrote. If they write something, they can get it checked from the AI, because they might want to write themselves, but they, because of some limitations, they're not able to. So AI will help them there. And I think at this point of time, it's all AI in the digital accessibility space. So, but it's human centered. Again, we can't just rely on AI without having the actual users into our structure, right? If you don't have a person with disability who gives you a feedback, you won't rely on AI unless you know about it, unless they tell you about it. So how much ever the AI comes in, it's like it's all AI, but still the human is at the center. It won't get replaced.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, so sort of rounding off, closing comments.
Sorry. Before
Okay.
rounding off, I would just like to have your perspective on it, from being like leading a design institute, and how do you look at it from your perspective? Because that's equally important, right? We are talking about getting this into education, getting it into students, and the generation which is going to lead this.
Okay. So the way I look at it is, of course, very personal. Again, personal not because I have a personal challenge at home, really, as much, but as bad as Siddhant's perhaps. But my feeling is that every institution should have a space for inclusion, and accessibility is one part of that inclusion space. I think we've always had this problem in our country of exclusion, and there is social exclusion, there's caste exclusion, there is patriarchy at home, there's parochial attitudes that exist. So I think all of these things exclude people. I think if we can work towards all institutions becoming inclusive in some way, it becomes easier for accessibility to become part of every conversation, like you guys are saying. The other thing that I think should happen in this, sort of just to follow up from what you guys are saying, is that, I think this conversation should start at a primary school level. I think there should be, students from blind school visiting, schools, which normal routine schools. And sadly, I'm using the word normal. See, I mean, how badly affected we are. So if young people can actually assimilate on their own, I think they will find a way to embrace each other, and then there is less exclusion. So I think that's what I would want to sort of see in the education space and the learning space, because the more learning there is from one another at that young age, the more sensitive that we are going to get for in everything they do in the rest of their life. Going back to what Siddharth was saying earlier. So that's my view. But listen, before I want closing comments from you guys, right? What is it that you guys want to see happening in the next 4 years, 5 years? Topmost.
You can go at first.
The priority list. Draw you first.
Yeah, I think first thing is it should be rooted everywhere. Education, industry, it should be at the center of. It won't be at the center of it in 4 years' time. It will take longer, I guess, the speed at which it is going. But it will come into picture in all, like, across industries, across countries, I think. Second is India should get it at the center of the discussion, because we are doing things, but we are doing it quietly. It should reach out to people, it should reach out to organizations who are actually trying to do this, and they should get the support which they need. Then third thing is again about something related to policies. Right? There should be something which is solid, like how the US has American Disability Act. It's one point center, right? It's one point from where everything emerged. I think it's lacking. We have different rules. We have something for infrastructure, PWD, accessibility. We have something for digital. We have something for the rest of the spaces. But we don't have that Disability Act which can be implemented across all spaces, be it digital, physical, any other medium. So that is something which we need. And I think it will come. It's coming in India. And yeah, I think Siddhant sir will tell about how it is coming because he is getting in it.
So as Rohan said, and like seconding all his thoughts and points, like particularly what I also feel is that it needs to become a necessity. It can't be a virtue. It can't be that you do it as an add-on. It can't become a feel-good factor that, okay, let's bring that in. It has to become something that is routine. It is, as Rohan said, the time then you have to stop justifying that why is accessibility important? Why should we consider this groups or audiences in this particular space? So I think the day that stops, we are then moving closer towards looking at accessibility becoming amplified, like what we are talking about, like the theme of this Global Accessibility Awareness Day also, right? That how do you amplify access, like while it's happening now, like the three of us here, right, like as an institution, like the three stakeholders here, the institutions, we working as consultants, and as Rohan is also working in a corporate setup in that space, everyone has a role to play. And when those roles start working in an integrated way rather than in an isolation or in silos, when we start integrating what three of us are doing, I think it would literally amplify access in various domains. And I think that's the key towards looking at what future holds for us and making sure that it is inclusive.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. I think we've kind of come to a close on this one. Thank you, Rohan, for starting this off, and Siddharth for joining in. Siddharth and all the sort of bright sparks you got to this conversation.